I made up the story based on the information they gave me that day and in the 6 week run up to it. By the time everything was said and done, I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with the murder and rape.
The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guest, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their sole purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul. Today's guest is Jeff Deskovic, and he's here to talk to us about something I think most of us can relate to. And it's that point in life where we feel like things just aren't going the way we expected or the way we wanted. And I felt like there was nobody better than Jeff to talk about the point of how do we change our perspective and how do we keep the hope that things will get better. Jeff went to prison from the ages of 17 to 32 for murder and rape that he did not commit. And so you can imagine somebody spending time in the prison system for something they didn't do has had a lot of time to think about things. And he actually is now an attorney, which I think is just absolutely inspiring and incredible to make such a change in your life. So let's welcome Jeff. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm great, Andrea. Thank you for having me.
Did I get all those details right?
You did. You
Okay.
absolutely did.
Perfect. Jeff, your story is just so inspiring to me because I think so many of us give up on our hard days, and hard days are probably nothing compared to your hard days. I'll be honest. I think a lot of people, their hard days are just everything's going wrong from just ordering their takeout and it's the wrong order. And they show up to school to pick up their kid and the kid got in trouble that day. And then you go home and you go to make dinner and you spill something and people are just like, oh my gosh, nothing is going right. And your life wasn't going right in very dramatic ways. So I'm excited to talk about your story. It's so unfortunate, but I think there's a lot that we can learn, especially parents that have youth that are at risk youth and face this. I think there's things that we need to talk about in that regard as well. So, Jeff, let's talk about it. You got arrested at 16. Is there a
Right.
backstory we need to talk about first, like your life prior to this?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll spend like a minute or two on that. So I grew up in Peekskill. It was the suburbs of Westchester County, New York. It was a small city, a population of approximately 25,000 people. So that's part of my backstory. Another thing is that in high school, I was quiet. I was to myself. I didn't quite fit in. And that was definitely a factor in it. Coming from a single parent household, it was my mother and grandmother, not my father. I think that was another part of the backstory that's relevant. And also, prior to being a teenager, I aspired to be a police officer when I grew up. And that was a factor as well.
Where did that come from, your aspiration to be a police officer?
Well, there was a police officer that lived in the apartment complex. Well, actually several officers that lived in the apartment complex where I were. And that was also part of how I was raised that, the police are there to protect us. They're your friend. And so it felt good having them around.
And probably that male role model a little bit, even if it was from afar and not necessarily somebody that was stepping in on the day to day. I can imagine in your mind, you were wondering, what is it like to be a strong male that provides support to people?
I agree with that. Yes, that
Yeah.
is true.
Okay. So What happens then that gets you arrested at 16?
So a classmate of mine, Angela Correa, that I barely knew, she was in two of my classes, a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine. That was really the extent of it. We weren't even really on a high-by basis. So she went missing, and then several days later, she was found. She had been murdered and raped. And so that set Peekskill like into a frenzy. I mean, like the whole
Yeah.
city basically shut down. I mean, parents were driving their kids to school, picking them up right after school, bringing them home. There were town hall meetings that were held where safety tips and updates on investigation were given. There were plenty of rumors.
Okay.
So in the course of the police investigation, they interviewed a lot of students from the school. Some of them told the police they might want to speak with me because I didn't quite fit in. So that got me on their radar. I was a sensitive teenager. This was my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction. And the cops thought that, given that I barely knew the victim, that my emotional reaction was disproportionate to what my actual relationship with her was. So
Mhm.
they took that as some sort of outward sign that I was sorry for what I did.
Mm.
And they got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which they claimed had the psychological characteristics of the perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that. So a reinforcing factor.
What can you explain what does that mean, a psychological like, does that mean they assumed whoever did it with blunt force and all these things, and so characteristically, they're looking for somebody that would do those things? Is that
Well, they're looking for characteristics of the person, not characteristics of the crime. I mean, you would get characteristics of the crime by looking at the body and the crime scene,
okay.
characteristics of the actual perpetrator. I mean, so
How do they
got
get that,
somebody
though?
they got someone that worked at the NYPD that dabbled in psychology, and he put together a profile. So somebody, with violent tendencies, likely a loner,
I
likely
mean, but
some
this is like
religious
Jeff,
system.
that's
It's so generalizable, but that's kind of the point, is that I'm sharing there was little to nothing that the police had foundation wise in order to suspect me. But that's the point of me sharing it.
yeah.
So for the next 6 weeks, the cops played this cat and mouse game with me, in which they would start out talking to me like I was a suspect. And then when they would push too hard and I'd become frightened and want to get away from them, Jeff, as this junior detective helper theme was developed. They would say things like, the kids won't talk freely, they will around you. So let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They would ask me opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct. As I mentioned, I wanted to be a cop when I grew up. So this unexpected early opportunity to do this quasi police work, along with my age, 16, was how they were able to fool me with that.
Oh my
Beyond that, as I mentioned, I came from a single parent household. My father was never involved in my life in any aspect. And that intersected with another police tactic, the good cop, bad cop technique, in which one officer was pretending to be my friend. And so in time, I began to look up to him as a father figure. Eventually, I agreed to take a polygraph test, a lie detector test. They said the police told me they had some new information in their file. They wanted to share that with me. That would allow me to be even more helpful to them. But first, I had to take and pass the polygraph. So the
mm,
next day, rather than report to the high school, I went to the police station for the test. Because it was a school day, my mother and grandmother thought I was in school. So therefore, they had no idea that anything was wrong. And therefore, they did not call around looking for me.
oh my gosh.
But they drove me from Peekskill, which is in Westchester County. They drove me 40 minutes away by car to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County, which meant that I wasn't able to leave on my own. I was totally dependent upon the police. They put me in the car by myself with the good cop, the bad cop, and the lieutenant were in the other vehicle. So the psychological overreach continued.
Mhm.
I had no attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat. The polygraphist himself was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he was dressed like a civilian. He never identified himself as law enforcement. He never read me my rights. He gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but then there were a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But I figured because I was there to help the police,
Yeah.
what does it matter? Let's just
Mhm.
get on with it.
Yeah, pretty
From
much.
there, he put me in a small room, gave me countless cups of coffee. Seems clear the purpose of giving me the coffee was to get me nervous.
And probably jittery, heart rate elevated.
Exactly. And then he literally wired me up to the machine, and then he launched his third degree tactic. So He invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again.
Mhm.
As each hour continued, my fear increased in proportion to the time. He kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And that really shot my fear to the roof. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me, "They're going to harm you. I've been holding them off. I can't do that any longer. You have to help yourself. Look, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested." Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. But also, I was in fear of my life because the fact that I didn't know where I was and that nobody else knew where I was either loomed rather large in my mind. So, and then there's this push pull dynamic, the possibility of harm, this false life preserver that he threw me. So, I took the out which he offered and I made up the story based on the information they gave me that day and in a 6-week run up to it. By the time everything was said and done, I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with the murder and rape. The last thing I'll mention to you quickly is that the interrogation was not videotaped. It was not audio taped. There was no signed confession. It was just a cop's word for it. And later on, when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out of their story.
Wow. So in court, they didn't actually even look over results of the polygraph or anything.
They did not overlook the results of the polygraph in court. So let's talk about the court, since you asked a question about it.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm thinking at some point, you're like, there had to be a lot of discrepancies in your answers. Was it consistently that you were lying, even about your own name, sort of thing, or, but I guess we'll never know.
Right. Well, he claimed the polygraphist claimed that his charts came up missing, so there was no way for anybody to review the answers.
Well, then
But
could you say, I'll do it again? I mean, not that you probably even want to at this point, but I don't know.
well, the other thing I want to mention to you is that many years later, I mean, he admitted that on the polygraph test result, there was an indicator that on the polygraph result that I might have given a false confession, but he never reported that. He never told anybody anything about that.
Well, and why does this happen? I mean, they don't get paid extra, or do they, for putting somebody behind bars for a crime?
They don't, but there's a lot of prestige in making an arrest. There's
Yeah.
promotions on the line, and if you can get promotions, then that does indirectly lead to
Hey.
getting more money. But also, there was a lot of pressure on the police to solve the crime, and then they also had the state police breathing down their neck. So the victim's family went to the state police and asked them to take over the investigation. And the
Oh
state
my.
police did not, but they told the Peekskill police about it. So, that ratcheted the pressure up some.
Yeah. I do wanna talk about the court system, but I briefly wanna pull in another case because some people might be listening and thinking, "This guy is full of shit, he's not telling the truth," and there's actually a really, really great example of your story, and you're gonna have to probably correct me because I didn't study the case per se, I just briefly saw a little bit about it. You'll probably know what I'm talking about or maybe not, but there was a man that essentially went in for questioning because his dad disappeared his dad disappeared, and he went in because his dad disappeared to report it, and then he ended up becoming the, like, prime suspect, and then they questioned him and they pushed him like you got pushed, right, to the point that he admitted to killing his father, and then a couple days later, his dad's, like, back alive and was like, "I was just on vacation." He was just on vacation, and there was nothing wrong with their relationship, and then obviously, I guess everything went back to normal, but it was just such a great example of how much the pressure can get, and this was a grown man, but how much the pressure can get somebody to make a confession that is not even true at all. Did you hear about that one?
I haven't heard about that one, but I have
Okay.
heard about other cases similar to that. And even when supposed murder victims turn up alive
Yeah.
later on. So that's kind of the nature of yeah, I know what you're talking about. I want to piggyback off of your point just to share with the audience that coerced false confessions have caused wrongful convictions in 29% of the DNA proven wrongful convictions. And although adults have given coerced false confessions, particularly vulnerable populations are people with mental health issues and also youth.
Yeah, and we're not gonna dive into it, but for people listening, if you're not following, I've been following the Dusty Turner case, and you can follow it on Instagram, and it's another fascinating one. He is a former Navy SEAL, I believe, and you're certain of that, but he ended up being accused of murder, and then the guy that actually did the murder came forward. I think it was years later. Don't quote me on the details. I didn't study the case. But the guy came forward and they have the actual person that did it, and it took forever for him to be released. He got released and now he is back in for a parole violation, which is insane because parole violation shouldn't even be a thing for him because he didn't ever actually commit a crime. So how is he even eligible for the parole in the first place? It's a whole thing. We're not going to get into it, but if you guys are listening and you want to follow stories like this because it just blows my mind and frustrates me, go follow it and go support him because I'm sure he'll be getting back out, or maybe he is. I don't think so. I haven't checked today. But anyway, let's get back to the system. Is that where we want to go back?
Yeah, yes, it is where I want to go. Yeah, I just would like to do a short recap of the trial for context for the listeners. So before the trial started, the DNA test results came in from the FBI lab, which showed that seminal fluid did not did not match me. But instead of acknowledging they made a mistake, they continued to prosecute full speed ahead.
So this is at the very beginning. This is like at 17 years old.
Yeah, yes, correct. Exactly right.
Wow.
Yes.
So at 17, you're in court and they're already acknowledging that the fluid doesn't even match you.
Correct.
But who cares is what they're saying. Okay.
Right. Yes. And the prosecutor's explanation for that, he gets the medical examiner to commit fraud, to commit perjury. He gets the medical examiner to say he remembered that he forgot to document medical findings that he claimed showed the victim had been promiscuous. All right. They lied about that in order that allowed the prosecutor to argue, aha, that is how the DNA doesn't match Deskovic, but yet he's guilty. She was sleeping around. Then he took it a step further and mentioned another youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, but he never tried to set the proper evidentiary foundation for that. He never had a DNA test performed on this other youth. He never even called him as a witness. He simply made the unsupported argument to the jury.
This doesn't make sense to me, Jeff, though. Like if she was promiscuous and there's fluid from somebody else, wouldn't the only fluid that would be present because of rape and murder would be the rapist's fluid? Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. But the other way to look at that is they said she was promiscuous in order to suggest that she had sex with someone before she was murdered and raped.
I
But
get
even
that.
in that scenario, I don't want to overtalk you. Can I just make a quick point? Even in that scenario, there would still be DNA present from at least two males, and there's only from one male.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I get that. I get that there would be her promiscuous DNA from somebody else, but where was yours regardless? So I get that. Okay. Carry on.
So
Sorry.
it's okay. So he got away with that because of two things. Firstly, the victim's family was not coming to court, so they had no idea what they were saying about her, right? And more importantly, the public defender that I had essentially did not defend me. So he rarely met with me. When he did meet with me, and I tried to explain to him I was innocent, what happened in the interrogation room, he was always shutting me up. One time he told me he didn't care if I was guilty or innocent. He never interviewed or called as a witness my alibi. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. He never used that to argue that proved the confession was coerced and false. He never cross-examined. He should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So the other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that same public defender agency, and specifically by the lawyer that was supposed to be supervising him on my case.
Who was your lawyer? Was this a
It was a
state
public
appointed?
defender. It was a Westchester County legal aid attorney.
Okay. I mean, I
But
feel like
then,
I could have done a better job, Jeff.
yeah, I would have preferred to have you than him. But that
Mm.
conflict, it prevented the defense from asking this other youth to give a DNA sample. It prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. Lastly, I wanted to testify because the cops left the threat and false promise out of their story. So I wanted to take the stand and explain that. And, the threat and false promise. But my lawyer wouldn't allow me to testify. He said it wasn't up to him to prove I was innocent. It was up to the prosecution to prove that I was guilty, and he didn't think that happened. So look, that's a legal principle. That's a naive way to practice law, as you know. So sometimes he told the jury there was no confession. Other times he told the jury that there was a confession, but that it was coerced. And at still other times he argued it was a false confession. So taking an approach of just throwing stuff against the wall and hoping something stuck, he had to have been standing there at the end in front of the jury with no credibility at all.
Do you think he was really on your side, or was he just
I
not?
no, I honest look, I have no evidence either way, but no, my own opinion is I don't think that I don't think that he was on my side because look, a really, really, really good third year law school student would have done a better job than what he did.
I'm not even a law student. I feel like I would have done a better job.
I think you would have. I would have preferred to have you. And there were a few additional irregularities in the trial. So first of all, despite the polygraph results not being admissible and there being a consensus that it's not scientific, that it's often failed by frightened innocent people, the judge created a backdoor rule and he allowed the polygraphers to testify. He allowed the polygraphers to repeatedly tell the jury that I lied when I denied committing the crime, but he banned my lawyer from asking him questions about the methods he used to arrive at his opinion. So could you imagine the prejudicial impact of that? But
Why
then
why?
also,
Why was that? I mean, we have to just assume.
well, I think the judge was biased, and that was an appeal issue, as we'll get to like in a moment.
Okay.
But then also, the victim's clothes, including her bra, had been entered as evidence, and the jury asked to see the bra, and it was then that the judge said that the clothes, including the bra, had been left in the courtroom over the weekend, and that the janitors apparently thought it was garbage, so it was thrown out and therefore was no longer available. And that was really important because that intersected with one of the statements that was forced out at me, in which I said that I ripped her bra off. But the way that some bras are made, you can't rip it off.
Yeah, I
So
know.
that,
I'm thinking, good luck.
right. So then, lastly, on the third day of the jury deliberation, because this is a mid-December trial, the jury sent out a note asking if we can't come up with a verdict, will we be kept sequestered over the Christmas holiday? And the judge said yes. And so I learned many years later that it was 11-1 at that point for a conviction, but that there was a holdout juror, but that the juror was being pressured. And then when the answer to that note came back, that ratcheted the pressure up. Nobody wanted to be there over the Christmas holiday, not even the juror. So he switched his vote based on that. I was wrongfully convicted and I was given a 15 to life sentence where I was sent because I had been charged, tried, and sentenced as an adult. I was therefore sent to a men's maximum security prison.
This is so horrible. And one of my questions beforehand was how much of this is human error versus the system, but it sounds like none of it is human error. It's human coercion, essentially, that's happening here
Right.
within the system.
I would agree.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well,
So from there, I did go. You have any questions on that? I was going to just.
if you have another point, you can go ahead and dive in. I have questions, but you can go ahead and
No,
dive
no, no.
in.
Let's do the questions now, and then I'll go to the next point because I was going to explain a little bit about how I was proven innocent. But let's get to questions about the trial.
Yeah, because I do. Well, I want to talk about just the feelings of, I mean, how did you feel when, I don't know, does a little hammer go down and says guilty? Is that real? You know, is that how it went down? I mean, how did you feel when it was like, oh my gosh, I just got sentenced for years and I didn't
Sure.
actually
So
do it?
right. Well, I mean, they announced the verdict is one court proceeding and the sentence is another one after that.
Yeah,
It's not
it's all.
simultaneous. But so they read off the first three charges. I was charged with multiple theories of murder, and I was found not guilty of the first three charges. And then suddenly I heard the jury foreman say guilty. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute. Wait, did I just hear that right? Did I miss the word not? But then I heard the word guilty said again, and then I heard the word guilty a third time.
Oh my gosh.
So it felt like I was in like a nightmarish alternative reality because up until that point in time, I thought that only guilty people were convicted.
Was your mom there? Did your mom believe you, or what did your
My,
mom?
my mother was there and she was shocked also. We all naively believed in the system and therefore we thought that I was going to be found not guilty. So this was
Yeah.
a really big surprise.
The system is so broken in both ways, though. I feel like there's also people that do commit crimes and then their time doesn't really match the crime. So that's like a whole nother thing. But what were you emotionally going through when that happened? I mean, what were some of the thoughts? Do you even, I mean, it's been a while. So do you remember?
I do remember. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a while. So that was 1990 and we're in 2026. So
Yeah.
we're talking about what,
Yeah.
30
36
yeah,
years.
yeah, right. But I do remember being stunned. I remember wondering, well, what's going to happen to me now?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Were you thinking, did you have a little bit of hope in you? Like, this is a misunderstanding. I just need to clear this up. I'm going to have to tell them this and this, or,
Yeah, and I did. I mean, and I tried to do that at the sentencing. I begged the judge to overturn the verdict. I referenced the DNA to support my contention.
mhm,
And he told me on the record, maybe you are innocent, but he didn't overturn the conviction. He sentenced me anyway.
yeah. I'm sorry. That is just so awful. What have you come to learn is the biggest misconception with wrongful convictions?
If you didn't do this, if you didn't do what they convicted you of, you did something else. That's a big one.
Mm,
Another one is people don't think that innocent people would ever falsely confess.
yeah.
People, they believe that identifications are really accurate when it's actually the least reliable form of evidence. There's other misconceptions. I might as well mention them. Obviously, if you didn't do it, they wouldn't have arrested you for it.
Mm,
And a third one is, well, another one, additional one is that if I was charged with a crime, you know, I would take the witness stand and scream from the bottom of my lungs that I didn't do it. I don't think that people understand that the standard advice from almost every defense lawyer is for their clients not to take the witness stand, and that as a trial tactic, it's not perceived that somebody getting on the witness stand and simply saying that I didn't do it, that's not considered to be of very much value. In fact,
mm,
lawyers look at it, well, the jury already understands that you're saying you didn't do it. That's why you pled not guilty, and that's why we're having a trial instead of you pleading guilty. So that's already understood. So that's not really that's not it's not worth it to take the witness stand. I think people don't understand, that aspect of it. And when you're in a completely unfamiliar place like a trial, I mean, you look to your lawyer, and unless your lawyer, look, I would say maybe 99 out of 100 people, unless your lawyer has something that's completely, totally out of left field and just so obviously wrong, people in general, well, you're going to follow the advice and recommendations and strategy of your lawyer. And
mhm,
so many of us don't realize until it's too late that, yeah, I should have taken the witness stand. In my case, there was something to take the witness stand about other than saying I didn't do it. The important thing would have been to explain, yeah, I confessed, but it's a false confession. Here's why. Here's what was going through my mind. Here's the information that they gave me, which I parroted back. Those would have been really important thing. And by the way, they threatened me and they made a false promise, which again, as I mentioned earlier, that was left out of the cop's testimony. So there were concrete benefits in my particular case to have testified for. So I wish that I would have done that. But again, I'm 17 years old.
yeah.
And then lastly, I'll mention, since we're talking about emotions and thoughts and everything, I mean, when I wanted to testify, my lawyer said to me, other than what I mentioned, another thing he said in getting me to back down and defer to him to not take the stand, he said to me, look, you already thought you knew better than the adults once already. Okay. And look how that turned out. You got arrested. No.
And then you're
So
probably like, "Oh,
well,
valid
you
point.
got
Okay."
a valid point. Yeah. So just sit back. You're 17 years old. Just let me do my, okay. I got this. What am I
Ah,
gonna say to that? What am I going to say to that as a 17-year-old knowing what I knew then rather than what I know now?
yeah, and it's like my life is on the line. He's an adult, he's a professional, this is what he does. I just have to trust him. But when you're talking about the jurors already know that you're guilty, there's no need to get up there. I feel like if I was a juror, I would want that human to human connection. I would want to hear it from them, and I could see where there's questioning in their own minds of, "Well, why can't he get up there?" he's shaking too much? Like, I wanna hear it from him. Like, I wanna see the emotion that comes from him and see if I feel like he's telling the truth. I mean, that's how I would feel personally, but yeah. Oh gosh.
Maybe the
Okay.
last thing I'll quickly mention is that I don't believe that most citizens and therefore jurors, because jury members are made up of citizens that have been selected to be jurors in the
Right.
trial. I don't think that they understand the concept of, a presumption of innocence and that the prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mhm.
It's not, in other words, it's not simply whether the jury believes that a defendant is guilty or not guilty. It's also, did they prove it? So,
Mhm.
in other words, a juror under that proper legal framework, it's a juror could believe that a defendant's guilty, but simultaneously hold the view that they didn't prove it.
Yeah, no proof. Yeah.
And if there's no proof, you're supposed to vote not guilty, regardless of whether you believe the defendant is guilty or not. And
Mhm.
I don't believe that most jurors understand that. That's
Mhm.
kind of a tough one to wrap your head around, honestly.
Yeah. Are attorneys allowed to give a little bit of education to the jurors?
They are allowed to do a little bit of education to the jurors, and then also the judge is supposed to explain that to the jury. That's part of what they call the jury charge.
Okay.
But even with the jury charge, I don't believe that getting that information and then shortly after that, you start deliberating. I don't think that that's enough time for it to settle in, think about it some more, ask a question or two, clarifying it, let it really filter in, and I got it.
Mhm.
There is no allowance for that when it comes to jurors and trials.
Yeah, and you have to also think how much they screwed with your mental state when they were trying to get you to lie on the lie detector and get that false confession. So you've gotta understand those same tactics are being used on the jurors with the attorneys, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to just quickly mention I ultimately, did 15 years in prison. I lost 7 appeals. I went to the parole board at the conclusion of those 15 years, and then largely because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, I got turned down for parole. So I did another year. Ultimately, I served 16 years
Mhm.
before I was exonerated through further DNA testing. They took the crime scene DNA evidence, which didn't match me, put it into the DNA data bank, which the data bank didn't exist before.
Mhm.
And it matched the actual perpetrator whose DNA was only there because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim just 3.5 years later, who was a school teacher and had three children. So on
Mhm.
September 20th, 2026, my conviction was overturned and I was released. I reported back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all charges were dismissed against me on actual innocence grounds. And the actual perpetrator, confronted with the DNA match, he confessed and he was subsequently arrested and pled guilty and was sentenced for the crime.
Did you get any apologies?
I got a symbolic apology from the judge at the post conviction, but that was not the judge that presided over my trial and declined to overturn the conviction, but instead sentenced me. I got a symbolic apology from the district attorney, but she was not the district attorney at the time I was convicted. I got a symbolic apology from the prosecutor in the courtroom when the conviction was overturned and the case was dismissed, but that was not the prosecutor who prosecuted me. So none of the people ever involved in what happened to me that had a hand in it ever apologized. The only person that apologized was the actual perpetrator, and to the extent that that even had any value at all whatsoever,
Yeah.
he managed to take the little bit of value away from it because he mixed his apology with a lie. He claimed that he didn't know anyone was doing time for his crime. And if he had known, he would have come forward, which I don't
Yeah.
believe that because Peekskill was such a small city. Everybody was talking about it. Every time I went to court, it was a big media moment. And I actually met somebody after I was exonerated that used to get high with him. And they told me that sometimes they used to talk. He didn't indicate he was guilty, but that they used to talk about the case. So I knew he knew.
Mm. Okay. So he would talk about the case and say he knew somebody was in or
Well, he
doing
did
time.
this. We talk about, yeah, yeah. Well, the Correa murder and Jeffrey Deskovic is on trial for it, and that
Okay, so he knew
going
enough.
this way. This is the latest court development with this or with that. So he knew who he killed. That's what I'm saying. Certainly, he knew about it when I was convicted, right?
Yeah.
At that point, there is no more hope that maybe this trial turns out the right way, and therefore I don't have to say anything so I can continue to get away. Once I was found guilty, even that excuse was taken away.
Well, and somebody that goes and commits a murder the first time, but somebody that commits it twice, they're definitely not the kind of person that's gonna give a crap about somebody else doing their time. I promise you.
Correct. I would agree with that. So, look, it was a difficult 5 years of freedom because it took 5 years before I was compensated. So, really quickly, recounting the difficulties, technology was different. Cell phone, GPS, internet hadn't been created.
Okay.
Culture was different. Cities and towns didn't look the same. So, those three elements made it feel like I was in a parallel world, one that I didn't belong in.
Mm.
It was always awkward when I'd meet up with my extended family because the overwhelming majority of them never came to see me. And the few that did, it was many, many years in between visits. So they essentially had become strangers. I was always passed over for gainful employment. It seemed like every would-be employer wanted somebody with job experience who could hit the ground running, whereas I required a little patience for on-the-job training. So I was making money doing speaking events and I was making money as a weekly columnist, but the paper only wanted one article a week. So I had little money coming in. And
Yeah.
with that, I had lack stability of housing. At one point, I came within a couple of weeks of a homeless shelter, saw a mental health professional 4 times a week for 6 years to deal with the psychological after effects as well as navigating new life, free the stigma. I had been in prison for 16 years wrongfully, but I had been there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on me? Was it safe to be alone someplace with me? Definitely that was a significant obstacle with respect to personal relationships. And lastly, it was very lonely. So it was a difficult first 5 years of
I'm sure.
life on the outside.
Well, I wanna ask you, how did you have hope, though, on your darkest day? And can you tell us what that darkest day was?
Sure. Yes and yes. All right. So I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation. I would describe prison as a nonstop obstacle course featuring the guards, civilians, and other prisoners as obstacles to the main goal, which is to overturn the conviction and regain your freedom. In terms of what kept me going, belief in God. Then also, I lived from appeal to appeal. So I didn't focus on a 15 to life sentence. I thought I just had to hold on for a year or two to the next appeal was
Mhm.
decided, which I was sure I was going to win and go home because I was
Yeah.
innocent, leaving the system. Used to go to the law library and learn the law because I didn't trust public defenders to defend me anymore. But it also gave me a sense of comfort and empowerment.
Mhm.
I used to collect articles about other people who were exonerated. So I used that as inspiration to keep going. But I was also studying who helped them, what route did they take. In addition to that, the utilization of euphemisms. So it's not my prison assignment in the morning and my prison assignment in the afternoon. It's I'm going to work or I'm going to school. From 98 to 2006, I read 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week. So that gave me something to do besides writing letters, doing legal work, to do in my cell. There was
Mhm.
another prisoner there named Frank Sterling, and we kept each other going for 13 and a half years. We were both innocent. And, Frank was exonerated by DNA testing a couple years after me. So I wasn't naively believing he was innocent just because I happened to be.
Yeah.
Lastly, I'll say that I'm just desperate for contact from the outside. I placed a advertisement looking for a pen pal. Somebody answered. So that pen pal, it seemed, showed up right in the nick of time. I struggled the most. There's a tie. Okay, we're going to do theater of the absurd. He said darkest moment. So you pick which two you think was worse because I
Okay.
can't distinguish it. So my last year, so my appeals were over. I lost 7 of them. I wrote letters looking for help for 4 years, rarely getting any answers. Then I got turned down for parole. So that last year was extremely difficult. I really, really fought to have any kind of hope. And I was asking the stranger that I didn't know anywhere, do you think I should quit? Should I give up? Should I just commit suicide? I'm never going to get out of here. So that's candidate 1 for the
Mhm.
darkest moment. Candidate 2 is we're 6 years in and I am sent to solitary confinement because I was defending myself against other prisoners that were coming to stab me
Okay.
because as far as they were concerned, I was a sex offender So I got sent to solitary confinement, right? I was there for 28 days. You don't know what day it is. You don't know what time it is. There's no clock. You can't see the outside
Mm.
or the property in your cell. Whenever you leave the cell, you're in handcuffs. I could go more details. I don't want to kill the time of the interview. So I'm there. And while I'm there, I get notice from the federal court that because my petition arrived 4 days too late, which was a lateness caused by the court clerk giving my lawyer the wrong information, they decided to just rule that I was late and dismissed my case based on that instead of looking at my evidence and looking at the legal issues. So I don't know which one you want to consider the most dark, but you can rate them. Be my guest. Have at it. I can't.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I mean, that's both rough. I feel like number 2, though, really would have just, I don't
Right.
know, felt like this whole cascade of things.
Sure.
Yeah, I
But
think
uh,
I'll
but while the dark times on the outside, my first 5 difficult years of freedom, which we covered a minute ago, I was simultaneously, though, I found myself as an advocate. So at the same time, I'm struggling in all those ways. I also, I'm writing, I'm speaking, I'm meeting with the elected officials, I'm trading my privacy for awareness, hoping that that leads to some legislative changes aimed at preventing this from happening to other people.
Mhm.
Got a scholarship from Mercer University, at that time, Mercy College, to finish the bachelor's degree because while wrongfully imprisoned, I got the GED associates and a year towards the bachelor's at the time that funding was cut. So they allowed me to finish the bachelor's. When I lost my temporary housing, they allowed me to live on campus, which is how I avoided the homeless shelter coming a couple of weeks within that. But I was able to make good from there. I tried to go to law school, didn't get in, decided that getting a master's degree, the extra credential, would make
Mhm.
me more effective advocate. So I did that. My thesis was written on wrongful conviction, cause, and reform. I was able to receive some financial compensation, use a portion of it to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which would continue the individual advocacy work but from a nonprofit perspective,
Mhm.
but also be able to free people. So since opening our doors, we've been able to help free 15 people. We helped pass 9 laws. At some point, I got tired of sitting in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to sit at the defense table, represent some of the clients, make some of the arguments. So I made a second attempt at going to law school. And, I did get in this time and, I graduated law school and I'm an attorney now.
Yeah.
I have my own caseload. We have 11 active cases. That's aside from the 15 people we've helped go home. And we're working on policy initiatives in New York, Pennsylvania, and California.
Wow. I think we all have roadblocks in life, and it's this choice of, am I going to let it be a block or am I going to push through it and figure out how do I get over this barrier? Because I can definitely hear and understand you. You have a lot of resiliency in you. And I can understand that's also part of human nature. But some of this happens to us when we are really pushed up against a wall. We really have to fight the hardest, right? When the roadblocks are on the smaller side, I think sometimes we just don't find that fight in ourselves. But any human, I think, gets pushed the way you did, you're going to find a way to, find your way out of it. And I always say for me, I feel like the key to success is being solutions oriented. I think that's the biggest key here. And I feel like that's what you're sharing within your own story was I had to find a solution. Every single day was gonna be monotonous, right? And it could feel a certain way, but it could also feel another way if you were able to kind of tell yourself, "I'm going to work today. I'm doing," and label it in a different way. And so you really found a way to see things that you were seeing, but see them in a different way that was gonna be beneficial for your mindset and your mental health. And so I think that's really, really impressive. How did you I mean, does all of that answer how you didn't become bitter? I feel like
Yes.
yeah.
Let me speak to that. That's a great question. So I was angry and bitter in my first week home, and I realized that anger and bitterness was destroying me. So I realized I couldn't be angry and bitter.
How did you get that realization?
So, less than a month before I was released, shortly after I got transferred to a different prison, I got transferred to Sing Sing, and I saw another exoneree, Alan Newton, on television giving an interview after he had been exonerated. And they asked him if he was angry, and he said that he was not angry. And being completely candid with you, I thought to myself, well, that's just the silliest thing in the world. Of course, you'd be angry. And that's an example of what not to do should I get exonerated, right? Except that he actually had the better of it. He was right. So at the end, so when at the end of that week, when I remembered what Alan had said, and that's when I realized I had to let the anger go. And I arrived at that. I recalled that, but several lines of reasoning also, which is that I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I can't do that if I'm angry and bitter at the same time.
Mhm.
Look, I've already lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? I will really be the only loser in that scenario if I was to be angry or bitter. And the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. It's healing, it's cathartic, it makes my suffering count for something, and it's meaningful. I know it makes a difference. And
Mhm.
I make sense of everything that happened to me in a kaleidoscopic type of way. I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in this world. And with that, I have a inner peace.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of do the same when I deal with a lot of health issues, and when things start to surface and bubble up, it's like, "Okay, I'm frustrated, I'm mad," and it's okay, like, let it out, cry, but then it's like, "This is not beneficial," right? How does this emotion serve me? And if it doesn't, then we gotta let it go, we gotta move on, right? And having those emotions of frustration and anger, we can acknowledge that, like, "Okay, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, but what am I gonna do with this? I'm gonna do good in the world, and I'm gonna channel it like you're saying." So it's okay to have those emotions because they really are what propel us to something else, but you gotta let them go.
That seems like a great segue to make a different point that I'd like to share with your audience. I mean, I'm a deep thinker and I like to reflect and then share what I think. And so when I think about the arc of my story and my journey, which is still going on, I've come up with this formula. Okay.
Love it.
So sure. And this could apply to any walk of life, right? However extreme and big or not as much. Have a goal, right? Have a realistic plan. So you should be able to look at the plan and look at it three or four different ways and say to yourself, well, yes, I could see how this could potentially work, right? Because who wants to carry out a plan that you don't think can be successful?
Yeah.
Be flexible. Remember that the goal is the goal. The plan is not the goal. The plan is just how to get there. So as
Mhm.
you're moving towards that your goal through the plan, you got to be flexible to vary depending on how situations unfold. No excuses. There might be reasons why something is more difficult to do, sure, but no reason why you can't accomplish it. You just have to want it enough. You just have to be willing to work for it enough. So that's the next point is work really hard for. I'm not a pie in the sky person, okay? I don't believe that everything is going to be okay just because. I think that you have to work really, really hard and to put yourself in a position where a miracle could happen, a door could open, someone may help you, but you have to work hard to put yourself there.
That's absolutely it.
Uh,
You have to get yourself there.
And then lastly, never give up. And the moments when I feel like I can't continue on anymore, I say to myself, maybe this was the key moment right now, though. Maybe this is where I was on the verge of a breakthrough. But
Mhm.
because I can't continue anymore, it's not going to happen. So even though I feel like I can't go on anymore, I'm going to do it anyway, just to see what happens on the other side. And then when you cross the bridge, when you get there, you reach back for somebody in the same position that you were in that's dealing with the same thing. And if you can do that, then again, I think it creates meaning, it's healing, it's cathartic, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I love that. Do it anyway. Do it anyway and see what happens, and yeah, look back. And I really do think we are all put here for a very specific reason, and it's we're all this giant puzzle piece and meant to help one another in some sort of way, and we all have these different stories, and I think it's important that people share their stories. I know there's people in this world that think, keep your shit to yourself and we don't need to hear your complaints and whatever. But I think people need to understand people aren't all necessarily, some people are just complainers. Sure. It's, day in, day out, all day, every day. And they're just complaining and you never see them make any strides forward in life. But then there are people that they're not complaining, but they are sharing the journey that they're walking, the difficulties, because they want people to say, hey, like, I can do it if she can do it sort of thing. I can do it if he did it, right? And so you're sharing your story and it's not, "Oh, poor Jeff for getting convicted and, oh, feel bad for me. And you're like, I don't want this to happen to somebody else. And I understand the system now. And I found a way. And it sounds like you learned a lot of valuable lessons, a lot for sure. So this has been a very great episode. Is there anything else that you want to share with people that are, like we talked about in the beginning, feeling like life is just not going how you want it to? And it's like, okay, how do I get off the hamster wheel?
Well, look, a couple of quick things. Look, I'm an intentional, goal oriented type of life. I definitely am a dream chaser. So I think I live and I know that it's better to chase your dreams and to go all out to try to turn them into reality. It's better to do that, even if you ultimately don't accomplish what you're trying to do. I think that's better than to instead just think to yourself, well, coulda, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. I think again, having goals, putting together a plan, moving towards them, believe in, self-actualization, exploring all sides of the self, deep conversations that have that will first deep reflections and then share that, appreciating the small things. I mean, I enjoy sun on my face, fresh air, being able to go outside, freedom of movement. I love trying new things, going new places, trying new foods, and just in that way experiencing what the world is. So those would all be just some keys or whatever, just some of the insight I have as a result of my life
Yeah.
journey. So I wanted to share that. And speaking of a dream of mine in motion that I hope one day it will come to pass, I'm working towards it. My goal is I would love to have a chapter of the Deskovic Foundation in each state and ultimately in each country. I see this as a worldwide issue. And countries where we don't hear about wrongful conviction, I can assure everybody it's not because the system is getting it right 100% of the time. It's that no one's being exonerated. So I would love to spread it. That'll be when we get the public support to make that happen. My crazy dream, what if there was one way to get there potentially? What if there were 25,000 people that were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis via our Patreon page? That would give close to $1 million. So we would be able to hire additional attorneys, paralegals, other essential personnel so we could work on freeing more people. Right now, we have 13 active cases. We're above our capacity. We certainly can't take more. But if we suddenly had more bandwidth because we were able to hire additional people, then we could work on freeing more people. And also on the preventative side, the policy changes which are aimed at preventing this. So that would be one way. Lastly, I'll just throw it out there into the universe. My biggest challenge as a founder of a nonprofit organization, I mean, I kind of somewhat arrived where I'm at social economic status wise artificially by means of the lawsuit. I didn't make it in business 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So I need third parties that can serve as connectors that could introduce me to people of capacity. Look, here's my story. Here's my credentials. Here's the mission of the organization. Here's what our track record is. Here's the metrics we could hit if we had additional bandwidth. Is this something that interests you? So just to get into more of those short conversations, and people work at corporations that do corporate philanthropy to just suggest us for that. I'd love to one day have my book, which is 95% done. I'd love to have that published. I'd love to see a movie come out. And I hope that there's a director and producer of a documentary about me, which is called 16 Years, but she's looking for a distribution outlet. So I hope that she could find a distribution outlet because I want to share the story. It's about raising awareness about the issue of wrongful conviction. My story is one example, and heightening, uplifting the work that the organization does, hoping that that could inspire some people to join me and help me through the various ways and means that are open to them so that we can collectively do more good than what we're able to accomplish right now as currently constructed.
Yeah. Well, I think there's such a lack of awareness on prisoners that are wrongfully convicted and incarcerated. I think a lot of people just don't even know that's a thing, to be honest, and so they don't realize what a need there is to support your foundation. But I also want to mention too, you touching on the joys and the simple joys in life, like just really savoring your food and going out and enjoying a meal. I think so many people get complacent in their life and it just gets harder and harder to find joy. Like the fulfillment just doesn't come unless it's something so big and so great. And it shouldn't be that way. And I think when you experience something you've experienced, really brings you back down to earth and what we really should be appreciative and grateful and get joy from. So, but yeah, your foundation is amazing. So, can people go on your website and make
Yes, they
donations?
can. Yes,
Okay.
they can. The website is www.deskovic, that's DESKOVIC.org. Can follow us on social media, like on Instagram, Deskovic Foundation, on Facebook, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. My personal page is there also, Jeffrey Deskovic, which is open to the public. I have my public figure page because more people like to keep up than what the 5,000 limit is. So people can follow us through those means. And the website also has a web form so that people could email me through the web form. And, I answer our emails, so you're not going to get a staffer for that. I do personally answer the
Yeah.
emails.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. This was, I hate to say this. I feel like I say it a lot sometimes, but I'm like, every time I'm like, this is my favorite. This has just been it, the insight that you have is just, it's insight that not everybody can bring. And I'm really grateful that you got to the other side and that you're sharing your journey because I don't know if you even understand how valuable the insight is that you're sharing with people because like I said, people struggle, but it's not to the degree that you've struggled. And that deep thinking, it paid off for you to get out, but it's also going to pay off for how much you can help other people. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. And I hope that this episode truly helps your audience to wake up their soul.
Yes, thank you.
Of course.